This is Football at 4.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here, and we'll get his take on everything that's happening right now around this Eagles team. As we've seen some news over the weekend, the Eagles officially named Vic Fangio the head of the defense, and Kellen Moore will be the new offensive coordinator. And as you guys talked about on the Inside the Birds podcast, kind of an interesting blend, this mesh of Sirianni's offense and Moore's offense. So your initial reaction to how Moore's offense fits with the personnel of Philadelphia, Geoff Mosher?
Well, Kellen Moore is known for his ability to scheme guys open, for having a good downfield pass attack. He's a versatile guy, Mike and Ryan, in that he blends two different offensive concepts. I mean, he kind of came out of Boise, spread offense, quarterback there, an Air Coryell type of guy, which is a very vertical offense. But under Mike McCarthy, started to incorporate the West Coast, the traditional old school West Coast offense that Mike McCarthy ran in Green Bay for so long, and went into LA and showed you a little bit of both. I mean, for a guy who likes to spread the field and throw the ball at 11 personnel, he did play a decent amount of 12 personnel with the Chargers, especially in the red zone. So adaptable in that regard. Uses motion a whole lot. So your question of how does that match with what Nick Sirianni does? Well, it doesn't, to be honest with you, but might be a good thing. So he's going to come in, and and we'll see if Nick Sirianni is being completely honest. Then the autonomy of the offense will go to Kellen Moore, and I think the personnel, Mike, fits Kellen Moore, Mike and Ryan, fits him pretty well. If you're an offensive coordinator and you're looking around and someone offers you a job and you've got a couple of opportunities, but someone says, well, you have a chance to coach, an offense that has A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, this offensive line, and Jalen Hurts. I think that that's a pretty enticing set of weapons for a guy who's really coming in and being asked to resurrect an offense. It's almost like he gets to start with the reputation of I don't want to say start off on the wrong foot, but it's not like the Eagles were smashing record. But, Brian Johnson had to live up to a reputation. That was tough. From Shane Steichen. Here, Kellen Moore just has to be better than that.
Yeah, we were talking earlier with John McMullen, and we asked him, is there something that Dallas offense did that you liked and now are looking forward to see how he might use that player here?
Yeah, that's interesting because, first of all, I feel like there's a real irony in what happened in Dallas. They hired Mike McCarthy, but they thought so fondly of Kellen Moore that they told Mike McCarthy, you're hired, but Kellen Moore is your play caller. And Kellen Moore was the play caller. And then in the second year of Mike McCarthy, they convinced Jerry Jones that, Mike needed to be the play caller. Let's move on from Kellen Moore. Let's do what Mike McCarthy wants to do. 2 tight ends, run the ball, balance the offense. Well, if you watch Dallas last year, as the season went on, they threw the heck out of the ball. They were 8th in passing yards, number 1 in passing touchdowns. So they literally got rid of Kellen Moore to balance out their offense and then wound up throwing the ball as much as anybody, among the top in the league. But what I think stands out, and I don't know if this is a Kellen Moore thing, guys, or a Dak Prescott thing, so it's going to be hard to see, is that Jake Ferguson, well, first Dalton Schultz really emerged in Kellen Moore's offense. He was not supposed to be this, prolific tight end, and he wound up becoming one. And then when he left to Houston this year, obviously Jake Ferguson took a big step up. Now, that was for Dallas with Dak, and Moore was in L.A. But I just wonder if the tight end, Dallas Goedert, is the guy. I'm kind of wondering if he can be unlocked. If the middle of the field, Mike and Ryan, is the area that gets unlocked in a Kellen Moore offense.
If you're Jalen Hurts, I know it's impossible to really predict this, but if you're Jalen Hurts, are you excited about this hire? Because sort of to what you've already alluded to, Moshe, it's a big difference. Like, this is, I assume at least, this is going to be a big change as far as scheme, game plan, identity from an offensive standpoint, whether he's under center more motion, and just more passing attempts throughout the entire year. So I don't know. Is that what Jalen wants? Is that what's best for him, you think?
Well, I think you're asking the question that I look forward to finding out the answers to. And, maybe down in Mobile, Alabama this week when I get to catch up with some people around the league, I'll get a better feel. But what I don't know about Jalen Hurts is how he feels about motion in the offense. We know from Nick Sirianni that Nick didn't feel like motion was necessary and that the only reason that you would really need motion is to get a tell on what the defense is doing. Is it man or is it zone? But other offensive people in the league will tell you that you can use motion and shifting, not full motion, for a variety of reasons, for keeping the defense off balance, for limiting substitutions if you're hurrying up, for giving the defense one look and presenting another. It's not just about figuring out whether they're in man or zone. Some quarterbacks do not like motion. Peyton Manning is infamous for not wanting motion. He didn't want anything getting in front of his face and flying around and all that kind of stuff, right? So I don't know how Jalen Hurts feels about it. I just know that they haven't used a lot of motion. But if he's someone that doesn't like it, I could see that being a little problematic.
Yeah. Now that we have these guys in place, what do you think's at the top of the to-do list for personnel decisions? Right? You say, okay, well, now that I know who we got on both sides of the ball, is there anything that stands out to you, Geoff Mosher, as far as sort of predicting what Howie may want to do here before the start of next season?
Well, I think when you go out and you get two guys of the experience that Vic Fangio has and Kellen Moore and their track record of success, then it puts the onus now on Howie to make sure that these guys can go out and coach with success. I mean, there have been times where the Eagles had some pretty good coaches. You look back on like the last 2 years of Jim Schwartz, which people kind of remember not fondly, but he had who's the defensive back? Corey Unlin was the defensive backs coach. He had Ken Flajole was a linebackers coach, and it was like these guys are doing an awful job. Well, Unlin's been a defensive coordinator, and he's still coaching right now. Ken Flajole is going to be in the Super Bowl again as the linebackers coach for the Kansas City Chiefs. It wasn't on them. They just had really bad talent at linebacker, corner, and safety, and that was from years and years and years of misfiring at that position, both in the draft and in many cases, free agency, right? So now there's no room for misfires here. Howie Roseman has to rebuild the linebacker, the safety, and the corner room in this offseason and make it good enough so that Vic Fangio can do what he wants to do defensively. Offensively, a lot of the pieces are already in place. I don't think he has to do a whole lot. However, I think a number 3 receiver, which is kind of a big thing for Kellen Moore in his offenses the last few years, you probably want somebody more reliable than the conglomerate that you got last year of Quez Watkins and Olamide Zaccheaus and Julio Jones.
Yeah, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. We're live at the Gallery Bar Book and Games at Ocean Casino. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I looked at with these hires was they got some veteran, strong coordinators, and the message to me is, as you kind of said, now Howie gets the strong coordinators, and now it's my turn to go out and do my part. So I think this is a sign they're going to be pretty aggressive because I think they think that they are a lot closer than maybe the fans think right now.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that it doesn't take like a juggernaut of a team, I don't think, to win the NFC East. The Eagles only lost it by, a game this last year, and we know the history. Nobody's repeated as champion, and next year will be, if there's a different champion, 20 straight years. So I still think you look at them and you say it's Eagles and Dallas was unable to get any further in the playoffs, and they've got their issues too that they'll have to resolve. They may lose some coaches, and we'll see what happens with Dan Quinn. So I don't think that they are far from being able to contend to win the NFC East again. The one thing you wonder is how far away are they from being a Super Bowl contender. You can say if you win the NFC East, you're in the playoffs, you're a top 4 seed, so that makes you a contender. But we know that there's especially this year, right? There was a distinction between basically the 49ers and then the other good teams in the NFC, and that's why they're in the Super Bowl right now.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think Kellen Moore probably didn't have to be sold all that much on the personnel here. He's probably looking at this offensive roster and saying, yeah, sign me up. But this reminds me a lot of oddly, the team from 2 years ago, Geoff, where they went down to Tampa and got bombed, but realized we need work. And they went out and got Hassan Reddick and then Bradbury and traded for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and traded for A.J. Brown. Like, I think it was a good ass whipping for them that they kind of needed almost to open their eyes that we need to get stronger coordinators, stronger coaching, and we need more talent.
100%. And to your point, I do think they still need to make moves among their coaching staff, position coaching and assistants, which they're doing. You know, they're out there still looking. They're giving permission for people who were with them last year to seek other jobs, and they're starting to interview names of people who have experience in this league. And you go, I don't want to cherry pick one example, but Andy Reid always had a very strong staff here. And look at how many people that he had, whether it's Sean McDermott or John Harbaugh or Ron Rivera, people who went on, and Steve Spagnuolo, to either become really good head coaches or really good coordinators elsewhere, right? And so I think the Eagles need to kind of have that in their pipeline again. They've got to have strong, solid veteran coaches. Now, I think it's unfortunate that guys like Sean Desai, guys like Alex Tanney, even Brian Johnson are going to be at the expense of this. Because if I was running the show, I would say, yeah, we're going to bring in a new quarterback coach who has experience, but I would like to keep Alex Tanney and maybe as an assistant quarterback coach and just acknowledge that maybe last year was a little bit too much for a guy who's only been a quality control coach to now be the position coach of the most important position in the game. Mm-hmm. But the Eagles, I guess I'm going to be accused of being negative. I've been reading the comments lately, but they are awful with their position. They are hiring and firing assistant coaches every freaking year, and nobody ever wonders why, their vetting process is. Nobody ever wonders. They always, at the beginning of the year, the cycle, right? You're down on the team, then they lose. Then the offseason comes. Guys get hired. They kind of hit the reset button. Then comes the draft, then the free agency. Then everybody loves the Eagles again. But nobody really takes a deep inside look about how often this team is replacing position coaches and coordinators and have zero sort of stability among those ranks compared to the Chiefs or the Ravens or some other rock solid organization.
Geoff, the Fangio thing's interesting now that the dust has settled, because did this just happen the day of the presser? Did this fall into their lap and they just reverse course? Because it seemed that the guys they were interviewing, the names that were at least mentioned, were a shift from the Fangio system. Did this just happen at 2:30 on Wednesday and they were like, oh, look at this? And they went back down that road? When the Fangio thing happened, did that just change everything, do you think?
I mean, it sure looks that way. The Eagles wanted Fangio as early as last year, and the timing didn't work out with when Gannon got his job. But to your point, Mike, I was actually tantalized, right, as a journalist about their interviewing of Mike Caldwell for the job. Not because I think, hey, Mike Caldwell, he's a legend or anything, but Mike Caldwell is a branch from the Todd Bowles tree. And what he's known for, he may not blitz as much as Todd Bowles. I don't remember Jacksonville being that crazy. But what he's known for is if he's going to attack you, he could attack you from any of the three levels. He could just four-man rush you. He could blitz a linebacker. He could blitz a nickel. He could blitz a safety. Even if he's just rushing five, you don't know where that fifth is coming from. And that's what Steve Spagnuolo does a great job of. And you've seen that against the Eagles with Trent McDuffie, right? And you just throughout the playoffs. He does a great job of that. So I thought maybe the Eagles were now looking to get back to their attacking ways. They've never been a big blitz team, but when they had Jim Johnson, they would attack you from angles you weren't used to. And I thought maybe that they were getting back to that. But I think the allure of being able to get Vic Fangio sort of, as you just mentioned, sort of conquer it all. And when he became available, they pounced.
All right, Moshe, we got all the Eagles stuff happening. Of course, now they have their coordinators. I want to get some quick thoughts. We've been going back and forth. Obviously, Dan Campbell's decisions yesterday. Where do you stand?
So I'm of the mindset that if you do something, so here's first of all, I'll say, I'm of the mindset that, there's no right or wrong. Two things can be true. I know that that's almost impossible to believe in this world of immediate hot takes and reactions. But I think he was fine in going for it. I thought it made sense given what their identity is and who they are on those fourth downs. But I also understand people who might say, yeah, but, there are certain situations where you can't just always push the pedal to the metal. So I get that. But I looked at those two situations, and I didn't see flaw in his logic, his thinking, and I don't necessarily know that if they do it differently that they're definitely going to win that game. But what I do adamantly believe against is the idea that you coach or manage a playoff game differently than a regular season game. I have heard that so much, and that makes absolutely zilch sense to me, because you don't get to those moments without being what you are in the regular season is who you are. And I think if you're a Philadelphia,
but don't you not think sometimes that's the problem, though? What you are in the regular season is who you are, and then you're not good enough to be a playoff team. You're not good enough to be
then you
a
wouldn't have
Super
been
Bowl
good
team.
enough anyway, though, Mike. Like I was the guy defending Kevin Cash from the Rays when he pulled his pitcher after 6 one-hit innings a couple of years ago against the Astros, because that's what they did. That's what got him there, and their bullpen wasn't a weakness. It was a strength. So they went from a strength to a strength in my mind. So I defended it. But I just don't think you change who you are in the playoffs. Now, you can do things differently. You can throw in a wrinkle that you haven't done before, but your identity should be what you are. And I don't understand people who think you shouldn't have the same identity, or you should manage a playoff game differently than a regular season game. I don't believe that at all.
Yeah, I said this earlier, but now that you're here, I just feel like that would have been a bigger side eye to me. Just to go off your point, I mean, he has led the league
100%.
I don't even need to go down the rabbit hole of what I'm about to do, the rant. Like, that is who he is, that the numbers back it up, the analytics backed up and supported it, right? So, like, if he all of a sudden...
conservative, he would have stepped outside. Listen, like, Philadelphia, right? If Doug Peterson goes for 3 instead of the Philly special, it would have been an abandonment of character, but a lot of people would have argued you need those points. The Patriots had just scored a touchdown on their prior drive. It was getting tight. You know you're going to need every point you need against the Patriots. But Doug Peterson did what he did all year, and I don't think the Eagles win the Super Bowl without the Philly special. So if you thought that was the right play at that moment because that's what the Eagles do, I don't see how you could second-guess Campbell for what he was doing.
Yeah. What do you think about Lamar Jackson yesterday?
I think he played a bad game.
Yeah, true.
I think Todd Monken didn't do him any favors either. They barely ran the ball in the first half.
It was a team effort of ineptitude.
Oh, of course. He wasn't the only one. Again, I'm throwing Todd Monken in there too, the offensive play caller. But it just was a very vanilla game. There was no flow to their offense. They wasted one of the best defensive efforts and best defensive teams you're ever going to see. They did play a very good defensive team and a coordinator who's probably going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think that's the under-discussed theme. Like, people talk about Mahomes and Andy Reid, but Spagnuolo is about to win maybe his 4th Super Bowl as a defensive coordinator.
On defense.
Yeah. They're really, really tough, and they conned Lamar so many times thinking like he's thrown into man when it wound up being two shell zone. Then he's thinking 2 shell zone. They come after him in man blitz. Spags did such a great job, so I don't want to take credit away from that. But the Ravens offense was just not very good.
No, and look, I thought Lamar did not play well, made bad decisions. They fooled him a lot. He also didn't get a lot of help. The styles make fights, and it was an ugly game, and he needed someone to help him out.
100%.
The Chiefs got help. Right, the Chiefs got someone to help Mahomes out, and Lamar on a day where he's saying, look, I'm not my best, but I'm doing whatever I can. You weren't there. I think Flowers was you could almost say Flowers had a worse day than Lamar.
I definitely wish Flowers would have not fumbled there and did the taunting thing, because I would have liked to have seen a more maybe epic finish, right?
Yeah.
Because let's face it, both teams sucked in the second half. I mean, the Ravens defense was great in the second half. Kansas City made one play that they needed, right? I mean, a couple of scrambles from Mahomes, but really the MVS play was the icer. That was like a big play, but most of their big plays came in the first half.
Well, Mahomes is we talk about game manager, and I heard, I think Orlovsky talk about this the other day and this morning. Mahomes was an unbelievable game manager in the second half. He knew that was an excellent defense. He knew they were having trouble scoring, and he said, I'm not taking sacks. I'm not throwing a pick, right? Like, that was a huge deal, to Gil's point about, adjusting. I thought that was brilliant of Mahomes.
I agree with you. I think the Mahomes of a couple of years ago, if you remember when they lost to the Bengals, was it, right?
Yeah.
In the AFC Championship game.
They're up 18
he was
in that
running
game.
around. Remember, he was throwing passes like while he was perpendicular to the ground. I mean, he was just doing some crazy thing. Now, he didn't have a great defense, so he probably felt he needed. But you credit him for knowing that I've got a great defense now. I don't have to make stupid, crazy, silly, superhuman plays. I just got to be consistent. You know, Brady did that. There were times where Brady just let his defense win games, especially early in the career, and there were times where he had to be a superhuman and come back from 28-3.
Yeah. Well, that's where it's like the style of the game yesterday. It's like Mahomes understood the game was not, I have to be Superman, we just have to make a couple plays, whereas I think Lamar had the feeling of, if I'm not Superman, we're not going to win.
Yeah.
And then that forces him into making mistakes and not playing well.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That is fair. Now, Zay Flowers had a bad game. He's a really good player, but I feel like that Ravens team without Mark Andrews, they just don't have like a Mr. Reliable. I mean, Zay's a rookie. He made rookie mistakes. Beckham's a good player, but he's not Travis Kelce. What they need is like the Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews type of guy, you know, who just is there when you need him, you know?
All right, Sports Bass Live, 97.3 ESPN. Good conversation today with Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, we'll have plenty more for football at 4. We're getting ready for free agency soon. Draft season will be here. And now that the Eagles have their coordinators, the offseason is underway. But we do have the Super Bowl. And, of course, you can hear Super Bowl 58 right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Moshe.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you from Mobile in a few days.